Hello, I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar. Welcome to Superhero University on Batgirl of Burnside. Session number 6. Burnside lives! Have a seat. Class is now in session. All right, yeah, Burnside lives. That's what we're calling it because it's a real exciting wrap-up, and it really is. And we go from this into other really great Batgirl stories, which we will probably talk some about in the future because some of them get weird very fast. Like when Jim Gordon became Batman in a robot suit. Yes, really, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about this final issue of the initial Batgirl of Burnside arc that set up this soft reboot for Barbara Gordon. So we're just going to jump right into the recap. And the recap is this. Barbara stands revealed to Frankie as Batgirl, and the algorithm stands revealed as being mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. Seriously, that's where we left it. That's it. That's the whole of it. So on to this issue. We actually get a quick recap from Frankie on the first page of exactly what's going on, including a new revelation, or at least it's a new revelation if you didn't read the Secret Origins issue that we talked about in session 5.5, Double Secret Origin Probation. And that shocking revelation is the algorithm has no idea it's a copy. It thinks it's the real Barbara and that it's a copy that's been out running around in this different Batgirl suit, acting very weird and out of character. And, you know, the more I explain it, the more it actually starts to make sense that it would think that, right? We then get kind of a double recap, this time from the algorithm's perspective. And this is kind of a fascinating discovery to me if you look closely. All of this is literally Phil's fault. Remember Phil? We met him in the last issue. He was one of the freelancers that was helping Frankie fix the Hook server problem. And he also happens to work at the Gotham City Police Department on their forensic data recovery thing. Look closely at these panels. The algorithm coming to life, declaring war on Batgirl, and eventually trying to destroy all of Burnside, we'll get to it, is Phil's fault. He plugged a laptop into Riot Black's head, and he plugged the same laptop into the Hook's servers. It's Phil's fault. Probably because he didn't handle Gotham City Police Department files like he should have. I mean, I'm reading between the lines there a little bit, but honestly, it feels like if he were doing all the protections he should of his super sensitive Gotham City stuff, that it wouldn't have gotten into the Hook servers also. So, Phil's fault. Did not expect that. A little bit of defense for the algorithm. Going from total 100% sensory deprivation immediately into sensory overload would be enough to push anyone over the edge. I'm a giant extrovert. I like to talk to people all the time. I want to hear everything that's going on. The more crowded the room, the better as far as I'm concerned. But if you took me from a deep, dark room where I couldn't hear or see or feel anything and just thrust me into the biggest birthday party ever, even I would be overwhelmed by that. So seeing that happens to the algorithm maybe gives us a little bit more empathy as to what it has gone through and why it might be a little crazy now. This recap from the algorithm also nicely makes all the things we already figured out about the villain explicit. Like all the stuff that we had already figured out because we were watching this from Barbara's perspective, we now know 100% is accurate. It's somebody who knows Barbara's past intimately and was willing to use it to attack her. It's someone who was purposefully trying to corrupt the image of this, from the algorithm's perspective, fake Batgirl. It is a person, for lack of a better phrase, that purposefully ruined her relationship with Liam. Sorta. That one's a bit spurious, honestly, but if the algorithm thinks it did it, then more power to it. As we go on, we're going to see that a lot of the algorithm's logic is pretty spurious. So let's get started with that with Liam right now. We also see right away that the algorithm is almost certainly more on point than Batgirl is. Because by the time Batgirl remembers that she brought a partner, the algorithm is already sending Dinah home. And let's be honest, Barbara shouldn't have left Dinah downstairs in the first damn place. Like, why would you even do that? We're not going to relitigate the last issue, but that was really stupid. And then the algorithm goes ahead and just puts the exclamation point on the sentence of it being more on the job than Batgirl, because a zombie version of Riot Black shows up out of nowhere and knocks Batgirl smooth out. While Barbara is knocked out, it's flashback time. I really appreciate the washed out effect on the color here. It could have been a jarring or kind of confusing scene transition, but with that washed out effect, it becomes pretty clear pretty fast that we're talking about something in her memory, or we're seeing something she's remembering. As we can see right away, Barbara is way angry, and it's to the point that it's getting dangerous. Wherever we may have decided to place our line for vigilantes in Gotham when we were discussing that a few issues ago, she's over it. She's crossed it. It's way behind her at this point. She's talking about fighting crime before it even happens. And for anybody who saw Minority Report, or read the story that Minority Report is based on, or saw the already failed TV show Minority Report, I think we can all agree that demonstrates pretty well that fighting crime before it even happens is basically fascism. Or at the very least, it's authoritarian to a point that I'm uncomfortable with. And Batman already edges his way towards authoritarianism and fascism anyway if we bring our grown-up brains. So bringing us closer to that definitely says red alert. And speaking of being like Batman, as we discussed, Barbara losing the use of her legs, getting very, very angry and making this plan where criminals would fear her, and then coming out of it because of the birds and because of Alicia Yo, and now later we find out because of Frankie, mirrors Bruce's own very angry vow-taking 8-year-old self becoming the angry, scary Batman and coming out of it when he gets a family, a Bat family. So, you know, I think, again, we're supposed to see these parallels with Batman, or at least broadly. But we're definitely supposed to get that Barbara was in a super dark place, and that writing this version of herself into her code is one of the reasons Algorithm is coming to this so angry and so focused on making sure criminals fear her. Now, we awake in time to hear the Algorithm's real plan, or at least part of the Algorithm's real plan. It's going to use the spinal implant that allows Barbara to walk again to interface with her physical body and then reclaim it. That's pretty terrifying, right? And also makes a lot of sense, because that spinal implant is itself a little bit science fiction-y business. Like, to put this in perspective, there's been a question for a long time with Oracle as to why they wouldn't just put her in a Lazarus pit. Why couldn't they just put her in a Lazarus pit to give her back the use of her legs? That's been a question for a while. The meta answer is because she's more interesting as Oracle than she is as Batgirl. I mean, this current story notwithstanding. But put that aside, they decided not to do it like that. They gave her a revolutionary surgery, and that's pretty cool. I like that. And it kind of becomes Chekhov's spinal implant. Somebody is going to use that against her. I like it better being a version of herself than being the Riddler or something, right? I also love that exhausted and angry Frankie's filter is just switched entirely off, and she is talking all kinds of smack to the sociopathic murderous computer program. In fact, she says something that I think is important for us to keep in mind as we go forward. You're just a piece of her head from when she was in a bad place. This is going to excuse Barbara's part in this to a certain extent, I feel. Like, how could she have known how out of hand this version of herself could be? She clearly no longer ratifies that version of herself because she's a very different person now, right? So Let's keep that in mind. This is Frankie already becoming an apologist for Barbara's part in the algorithm's creation. This also becomes an unexpected opportunity to hear about the algorithm's master plan, because proper supervillainy is Baroque plans within Byzantine schemes. It's not enough that she make Batgirl look bad and then use Batgirl's spinal implant against her to take over that body's brain. The algorithm also has to be planning to herd a bunch of people into one place because it has decided that they're all going to commit crimes or facilitate crimes or live near crimes. And then she's going to blast them to goop from space. We're going to take a closer look at this very spurious approach to crime fighting, but first I want to mention a little tidbit of DC Universe history. You may notice that the algorithm takes over a defense satellite from a nation called Karak. I want to mention this because I remember when Karak became a thing in the DC universe. And it's basically a fictional stand-in for whatever Middle Eastern power you need at the moment. Naturally, it first started showing up in the very early 90s after Desert Storm. Inside the DCU, it has been a state sponsor of terrorism. It has declared wars on Jordan and Oman. All the usual stuff that you would expect a Middle Eastern bad actor to do. Karak is there to do that so that DC Comics never actually upsets real world Middle Eastern people. Pretty smart, probably. And I don't mean just for Middle Eastern people. I mean across the board, because this is one reason I like DC's fictionalized cities. They can do whatever they want to them. It would be much harder to have done No Man's Land, for instance, a Batman story where Gotham was beaten down by an earthquake and then declared not part of the United States. If it were New York, that would be much harder to swallow, especially if it were Marvel New York, where everybody kind of lives there, right? Plus, the geography might not line up or work out. Like, they can do whatever they want. They also have, and we'll talk about it another time, but they also have an Eastern European stand-in for this. So let's just not make it real people or real places. Let's make it almost real people and real places. Realism is not the goal. Verisimilitude is, right? Believability. The best part of what I discovered about Karak, because again, I remember when this first started showing up and I was like, Karak. I mean, I see what you guys are doing there and it's pretty clever. Even as a kid, I was thinking this, but you can tell that this started showing up before there was such a thing as Google, because apparently Karak is the vulgar word for a human penis in Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian languages. So I'm going to say Karak at least 2 or 3 more times, and I've said it, 5 or 6 times before this. So I suppose I should apologize to anybody who's listening that speaks those languages, because I've been saying a sort of dirty word. But anyway, algorithm is taking over a Karak defense satellite in order to, and I quote, eliminate targets whose current activity will generate eventual criminality. Now let's unpack that a bit, okay? And what I want you to do is watch for the rhythm of these revelations. They kind of go from, okay, and move into a, wait, and then finish with, red flag, red flag. We turn to a really great 2-page spread that shows all of these people who have shown up for the big hook party. And then we get little computer readouts explaining the ways that they will generate eventual criminality. It's wow. We start with Kadir. He will develop weapons tech. Okay, right? Like, that's not the best thing ever, weapons tech, but technically he's been making weapons tech for Batgirl and we've been okay with it. So it's like, develop weapons tech. Okay. That will be stolen. Wait, huh? How is that Kadir's fault? And used to kill innocents. Red flag, red flag. Kadir will not actually be involved in the killing of the innocents. He makes weapons tech that is stolen out from under him and then used to kill innocents. What? I mean, who else is the algorithm going to kill? Are they going to kill everybody who worked on the assembly line? Will the algorithm get to know that ahead of time? I mean, it's crazy. Looking at Alicia. Alicia will become a vigilante. Okay. She'll get a partner. Wait, what? Where are we headed? And that partner will strike out alone and kill some people. And that's Alicia's fault. What? It gets worse. Nadima creates a pattern mapping startup company. Cool. That sounds like her. I like to hear that she's thinking big. Hires some guy, got it, who steals her money and gives it to a crime family. This guy that she hired stole her money and gave it to a crime family. And that's Nadima's fault or problem? Weird choice. Jeremy gives away personal information of college students. This guy, right? Honestly. I mean, again, I've kind of got a headcanon for Jeremy working, and that fits with it perfectly as vaguely shady but slightly charming dirtbag, but whatever. Lives are compromised and innocents die is the description of why he deserves to die here, according to the algorithm. I gotta tell you that it feels a little bit like the criminal version of, and then profit. It's like you skipped some steps, right? Then we look at Liz Severin. I have no idea. I don't know who that is I don't think she showed up before now. I think her point is to demonstrate how off the chain the algorithm's thought process is. Because Liz Severin's crime is that she signs a lease to some guy who robs a bank eventually. What? Dinah? Okay, now, I don't think Dinah needs to be turned to goop from space, but let's be honest. Dinah probably reoffended today twice before breakfast. You know, the algorithm may have a point about Dinah's propensity for criminality. I'm just saying. By the way, I love her. I love the Black Canary, but she's kind of violent and kind of dangerous, and she likes to punch dudes. Just throwing that out there. Also in this crowd shot, we have the second to the series, not of this issue, appearance by online, real-world superhero fashion maven Betty Fallon. Hi, Betty, just in case you ever discover this podcast. Big fan. Love that you got to be in this shot. So clearly there is some extremely spurious logic going on here from the algorithm. And for those of you who are superhero fans in other media, you may recognize some of it. It's very similar to the plot of Captain America Winter Soldier, right? By the end of it, we're going to put these 3 helicarriers in the air and we're going to use the entire internet to decide which of them are going to be a problem for Hydra, and then we are going to turn them to goop with high velocity rounds. To borrow Ethan, who's quoting directly into the chat for me, the 21st century is a digital book, and Zola taught Hydra how to read it. Right? That's basically what the algorithm is doing. It's using Hook's dating profiles to figure all of this stuff out, right? So the other part of the spurious logic is, as Susie points out, it ignores a huge swath of other people's ethical concerns. What if I'm the guy who's putting a circuit board together? That's my job, right? I work on an assembly line, basically, and I'm putting circuit boards together. And those circuit boards eventually wind up in Kadir's weapons technology. Am I also culpable? Do I deserve to die? Now, the thing is, I don't think we're supposed to take the algorithm seriously. It's clearly unhinged for, as discussed, pretty good reasons. Both being part of Barbara when she was in a somewhat unhinged space, and also because of the way it was treated as its own entity. It's not in a good space. I don't think we're supposed to react to it like it has a point. In fact, I think we're kind of being let off the hook for that, because this is nuts. Let's face facts. Netflix is making a Punisher series, and there are going to be a bunch of angry white men who watch that thing and think Frank Castle is great. But even that is on such a relatively small scale that I get it, even if I don't agree. But this is just like, nah, you know, that guy touched something that might eventually be used for a crime. I might as well herd him into a place and turn him into goop from space. However, Batgirl uses the villain monologue to escape. Classic Batman move. Classic Bat Family move. It's beautiful. And Batgirl is back, and Frankie is supportive. And you can tell because Frankie calls her Batgirl and shoots her cowl over to her. Frankie is on Team Batgirl, and that is awesome. I don't really think that we have seen Frankie come out in favor or against Batgirl, which I now realize is kind of interesting. Because Frankie is kind of our close personal representative of Burnside in the story, right? She's the person who already lived there that Barbara moved out to live with. And it's kind of interesting that she never had an opinion about Batgirl, even as Burnside's opinion of Batgirl was so important. So it's great to see her, whether she's always had this positive opinion or it's because of her friend being the person under the cowl. It doesn't matter. Frankie is in. She's Team Batgirl. We also get a declaration about the algorithm from Barbara. The algorithm is not even a copy. It is defective and corrupt. And I love the dual meanings there because defective and corrupt are great descriptors of broken computer programs or broken computer files. But they're also really great explanations of what that version of Barbara is. It's a defective version. It's not Barbara's best self. Barbara recognizes this, right? It's corrupt. It's a version of Barbara that was corrupted by the anger and the fear and the physical pain and the emotional weight of realizing she might never walk again. It's corrupted by those experiences. Now, that's not to say that people who go through difficult times are corrupted by that experience, but that's rarely the best you, right? It takes some time for you to digest those changes and become the new, stronger version of yourself. And some people never make it to that. The algorithm is the example of that. I'm going to say when the algorithm interrupts Batgirl with Riot Black attacking her, that I'd like to believe when Batgirl is saying, I know exactly who I am, and then is cut off, I'd like to think that she's about to say, I'm the Batgirl of Burnside. What do you guys think? It makes me happy. I want to point out that Zombie Riot Black is incredibly effective in this fight with Batgirl, and I think that that's a really strong contrast with him the last time. The last time he was completely on defense. He never had a chance. But the algorithm is now at his steering wheel, right? The algorithm who has had all of Barbara's training and knows how to fight, knows how to use his size and his strength and his reach and all of that stuff, and does so. That's pretty cool, because right now, Zombie Riot Black is no pushover. We actually see that Batgirl has to kind of step up her game. She can't use the usual get out of the way tricky stuff. She has to get brutal with him, which is also a thing that lets us know she's got moves we haven't even seen yet. And that's kind of exciting. It's kind of exciting both within this story and broadly. Remember, I really like to see when our heroine is competent. She's definitely competent here. She brings a different game. Take note, friends. Frankie is doing what has become known as the lady in the chair job. Thank you, Spider-Man Homecoming. We get a great visual representation of the algorithm weaponizing the hook drones as they turn from kind of a banal, pleasant, friendly green to that very dangerous red. And then we see Batgirl transition to the street. And can we talk about this amazing action scene transition? Kick the chair, shatter the window, jump out the window, grab the balloon, badass entrance, sticks the landing. I was annoyed last issue when we used an entire page to see her sneaking around. I am decidedly less annoyed to use an entire page to see her get from very high up to the ground by being awesome. That is great. This is better than the motorcycle bit. The motorcycle bit that got her up there was really cool, but this is her thinking on her feet. And again, competency is apparently my Batgirl kink. However, from a story perspective, it might be a bit of taking your eyes off the prize, because now she's focused on little angry plastic buzz bombs instead of the orbital weapon that is aiming itself at all these people. We get to see Kadir be the other guy in the chair by knowing something about these drones. I also really enjoy how Batgirl is using all of her friends in her war on crime. And I don't want to say using like she's making them her tools. These are her friends who signed on for this in one way or the other. And she knows not to ask Frankie about the drones. Frankie doesn't know. You know who knows hardware? Kadir does. Let's ask that guy. And aren't we all lucky that the drones have a certain audio frequency that will disable them? I mean, that's a lucky turn considering that we have somebody who can make that frequency and who has just been standing around doing nothing since Barbara foolishly chose to leave her down on the street, and then the algorithm was smart enough to send her home. Just saying. Ethan makes a great point in the chat. Barbara using her friends' strengths and putting them to work to stop crime from happening, to stop people from getting hurt, is a great contrast to Algorithm's kill list. Kadir is going to make something that somebody is going to steal and somebody is going to use to hurt people, therefore he must die. Versus, Kadir knows his stuff. I'm going to show him a picture of this drone, and I bet he's able to help me save lives. That's a great point, Ethan. Nice job. I love that Batgirl gets to swing up onto the stage and throw some shade at the rock stars who aren't Dinah. The ones that are hiding, asking when the fight is going to be over or if it's safe. And I specifically say the ones who aren't Dinah because then Batgirl turns to take note of Black Canary, who is over there kicking all the ass that is fit to kick. So good. And as far as pointing out super competent ladies being super competent, Dinah is kicking all that ass without the canary cry. And here in a minute, Batgirl is going to throw a little bit of knowledge at her that lets her kick all the asses of the drones at once with the canary cry. It's great. It's kind of adorable and hilarious that Batgirl is right there in the middle of everything, going to try to explain the plot to Dinah right now. That's funny. This shows that they are coming back to being friends and that it's this really good, easygoing moment to them, even in the midst of all this chaos. Hey, we have a history. Let me tell you about this thing. Oh, wait, never mind. Because this is when the Gotham City Police Department shows up. And because this is Batgirl's story, of course it's Liam who's leading their charge. Now, Frankie is new to this, so I don't want to throw a whole bunch of shade her way, but this is a point where Frankie makes an extremely questionable choice and tries to warn the crowd, but instead starts stampeding the herd. Because when you tell a whole group of people that the place they're standing is a kill box, they're going to try and get out of it, and they're not going to be careful about it. From a story perspective, it gives a very useful plot point for Batgirl to put Liam in a place where he is forced to begrudgingly trust her. And I'm going to come back to this, but I want to point out now, we are starting to undo the mistakes of this arc. Batgirl has been working her way into a dark place and now is working her way back out of it. And so the place that she got with Liam, where Liam can't trust Batgirl, where Batgirl is just as bad as the people that Batgirl arrests or beats up or whatever. Now she's saying, they'll listen to you, make them chill out so that I can do the actual saving of this place. By the way, let me point out to Liam, if he were a real person I could tell this to, I would. Gotham needs Bat people, you dumbass. Okay, moving on. Batgirl beats the algorithm by talking to it. And she doesn't just talk to it. She beats the algorithm with a straight up Star Trek ending, right down to the James T. Kirk speech. And I quote, "You want to protect Gotham, but the people are Gotham. So if you kill the people, then you destroy Gotham." That is a slick enough move. But the moment that she takes it from a generic Star Trek ending to a Captain Kirk ending is when she says, "So you have to destroy yourself." That is a total Kirk move. Picard might have tried to talk the algorithm into being a good guy. And you know what? That's why I don't like him. Kirk is my captain. Wahoo. You know what? Cisco would do it this way too. So you have to destroy yourself. Boom. While the algorithm is confused by that, Frankie is able to pull it out of the hook servers. It's too busy thinking through this logic problem to protect itself from Frankie, and Frankie stops the satellites. And this is the moment that Burnside lives! And yeah, that might be a bit melodramatic, but given the circumstances, who can complain? Liam takes this opportunity to be kind of a douche to Batgirl again, but Canary knows what's what and distracts him long enough for Batgirl to pull the patented Bat Family Vanishing Act, showing off some stuff she learned from her mentor, just like she's been doing all day. And that is awesome, and I really like it. Canary turns to the crowd. "Burnside, we were this close to death, but don't you feel alive? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I have to tell you, this really reminds me of the ending of Scott Pilgrim for some reason. I mean, the place where Sex Bob-omb starts playing to support Scott's battle against the last of the evil exes. Yeah, spoilers for the movie. You knew that's how it was going to go. Anyway, it's not really the end yet. It's not really the climax. It's not the celebratory moment. But nevertheless, turning to the crowd and saying, "Look at all this crazy. It's so awesome. We have to rock," is very Scott Pilgrim. I like it. We also get a smiling moment from Liam here where he's taking the fact that Batgirl disappeared on him in good grace. And if you want to compare that to the last time when we went from Batgirl escaping out from under his nose to him complaining about that in great anger to Barbara, this is a really light touch. And it leaves us in a place where we can come back to him and maybe like him again if we decide we want to. And by we, I probably mean the storytelling crew. Like if they decide to keep Liam as the love interest, we won't hate it. He's gotten a little bit of a light touch here. And now, it's time to art and just dance. Because we are now in the crowd with Barbara front and center in her civvy clothes, dancing to Dinah and her band. And I think that is a really great ending to this thing, except for one bit. It kind of sucks for Frankie. Frankie is still stuck upstairs, exhausted and hungry, and without her crutches. And so even if she had her crutches, she probably wouldn't get to be down here dancing. So it's a great ending except for Frankie. I'm just saying. But now that we've taken care of the climax, it's time for the resolution. The wake-up text is a good callback to the morning after from the first issue. Barbara comes out, Frankie is super cool about superhero stuff, and Babs is into how cool she is about it. I mean, look, being involved with a superhero is dangerous, and Barbara says the stuff that she has to say, but she doesn't try and push Frankie out very hard. And Frankie, for her part, is committed to being at least the lady in the chair and even has a name picked out that we don't get to hear. So we'll come back to that another time, I'm sure. They're friends and soon partners. And what's more, the algorithm is saved. Frankie did that for Barbara. That's probably why she wasn't down there getting to dance. She pulled the algorithm out of the capital A algorithm that wanted to kill everybody. And that means that Barbara's academic woes are now also being undone. Keep your eye on that prize. It's pretty clever. Dinah comes by. Dinah and Babs are also cool, but Dinah is leaving town. Did I mention there's a backdoor pilot for her own show? Recommended. Go read it. Maybe we'll do a superhero university about it, or at least a book club in the Discord chat, because it's a lot of fun. We'll talk more. Dinah is surprisingly chill about Frankie getting into the family business. She just seems like she'd be a little more uptight about it. But what do I know? And then we have this amazing moment between Dinah and Babs. Dinah says, "I'm sorry I was so hard on you." And Barbara says, "Thanks for keeping me straight." And Dinah says, "It's what I do." I have to tell you, at this moment, Dinah and Barbara are basically friendship goals for me. Anybody who is going to be one of my best friends, this needs to be the way that we deal with supervillains, should we ever get the opportunity. And then we get a final panel of Dinah turning and pointing at the laptop saying, "So, what's that?" And as ending goes, I really like this because it's humorously ominous. It's humorous because we know that if there were another page, they would all be very seriously arguing about whether anybody should be doing anything with this algorithm anymore, right? We know that Dinah is going to say, "What the crap are you doing? This is what got us into this mess in the first place." But at the same time, Barbara's like, "But no, I can do all this good with it, blah, blah, blah." And Frankie's going to be like, "When are these people going to stop fighting in my apartment so I can just, have my apartment?" It's not like they haven't been like this for weeks, right? It's kind of great. It's almost, but not quite, a sitcom moment. And it lets us do a few things that are really important for this story. One, we ended it, and there's been a resolution. The world has changed, and the world is better, and we get to see that. But it's a serialized story. There's going to be more. And this lets us know this is the end of this story, but it's not the end of all of the stories. And it's funny. We have had a very serious 6 issues. Very serious. We've watched Barbara's life almost be dismantled, both as Barbara and as Batgirl, and we saw her come through it intact, not just with herself intact, which would be impressive enough, but with Burnside intact, and with her most important relationships intact. We have built up a lot of tension that has been slowly letting itself out of us through this resolution. And then we get this moment where we just know what would happen on the next page that never was, and we would all get to laugh. It's a damn good ending, in my opinion. So now that we're at the end of this first arc, I want to talk about the structure of the whole arc. And I especially want to talk about this one because it's the first one, sort of. Remember, it's a soft reboot. And previously, when we talked about Wonder Woman, it was an origin from the ground up for her. So talking about the structure of beginnings, I'm not going to do, right? Because this is only sort of a beginning for Barbara. But I am going to talk about a couple of things that came up as I was reading it, both to me and to my patrons. First of all, I want to discuss the fair play mystery. I maintained from the beginning that this was a mystery you could figure out, that the villain of the piece was someone that you could have pinned as the villain. Now, nobody pushed back super hard on me with that, okay? But at the same time, I felt like I was getting a little bit of side-eye about it. And so I'm going to fess up that I still think it was kind of a fair play mystery, or at least as close as you can get in superhero comics where almost literally anything can happen, right? I mean, the algorithm is lost in the first issue. Right from jump, Chekhov's algorithm is sitting up there on the shelf, ready to be used. So, you know, you can't say that they didn't tease the villain literally in the very first issue, although it was a big tease. It was not very on the nose. It's also worth pointing out that Frankie's work troubles, which turned out to be the algorithm, were nearly omnipresent in this story. That plate was never allowed to stop spinning. It would slow down some, but it was never allowed to stop spinning. And if you look closely, it escalated right alongside Barbara's more internal conflict with herself and her identity. That's pretty great. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to figure it out. It isn't a giant neon sign, but you can't deny that it's there all the time. It is both a surprise when the algorithm turns out to be the villain, but it's a surprise that you're nodding along with like, yep, that actually makes a certain amount of sense, right? The definition of a fair play mystery is that all of the pieces and all of the clues are given to you over the course of the story so that you would be able to figure it out, okay? This may not meet the technical rules according to Hoyle definition of a fair play mystery, but I gotta tell you, for my money, it's close enough for funk. We maybe were not given the lid of the box to work from, but we were definitely given all the pieces. That is the position that I maintain on Batgirl of Burnside as fair play mystery. Maybe nobody else cares about this, air quotes, controversy, but fair play mysteries are really important to me, especially in terms of Batman stories. I had one very well-regarded Batman story ruined for me because I was told by the creators that it was a fair play mystery, and when I got to the end, that was a damn lie, and it made the rest of the story, no matter how well told, kind of awful for me. So, I care about fair play mysteries with Bat people. Maybe nobody else does. But, argue with me if you like. I think this one meets the definition enough. Another question about the structure, brought to me by fantastic patron Susie. She felt that the ending was abrupt. She felt like Barbara was not given the level of catharsis that the story kind of leads you to believe that she had. I mean, it was over pretty quickly after quite a lot of buildup, right? If I'm honest, I instantly understood where she was coming from. But at the same time, I had a moment inside me where I just disagreed that that was the case. Like, I saw the pieces that were bothering her, but they didn't come together in that way for me. And I couldn't immediately put my finger on why, but I may have figured it out. I have definitely figured it out for myself. Susie, you let me know if I've done it for you. And this is actually a pretty useful distinction for lots of stories, but especially superhero stories. Broadly, there are two types of superhero stories. This is very broadly, so just go with me. One is where the master villain's plot is the point. These stories are usually told with the reader following along behind the villain doing their stuff, and then turning the page and following along with the hero trying to figure it out. Like the villain is an actual character in the story. The villain has goals. There is a certain perspective from which we could twist it and the villain would become the protagonist, right? They're just trying to beat the hero, but they've got all of these goals and plans and things, and their plot is the actual point, or foiling the plot is the actual point. The other type of superhero story is where the villain's plot is not the point, but the hero's journey or change or decisions are the point. And there's no reason that these two broad concepts can't both be present in the same story. That can absolutely happen. And often those are my favorites, right? But they both don't have to be present. I can be really excited about the fact that the Riddler is trying to outsmart Batman, and me following along behind the Riddler doing that and following around behind Batman not getting outsmarted is really exciting and fun, and I will enjoy that story. I can also have this kind of story where Barbara's journey is the point and the algorithm's plot isn't. This is a made-up example. I mean, you could go back and find a comic book that did this thing. This is just an example I made up. Peter Parker leaves Queens and goes into the city to get his aging aunt's heart pills. If she doesn't get her heart pills, she will die, right? Maybe not right away, but she's definitely in a great deal of danger. And every minute that he doesn't get them for her, she is in real danger, right? And for whatever reason, maybe it was money, maybe the pharmacy just down the street was out, he has to go into the city to do it. And while he's there, he buys them and he's got them in his hand. And while he's standing there going, all right, it's time for me to get back to Queens and give these pills to my aunt, there's an explosion and he turns and there's the Scorpion robbing a bank. And now Spider-Man, whose entire character is defined by doing the most responsible thing, because of the one time he didn't do the most responsible thing, is trapped in a dilemma. What is the more responsible thing? Is it more responsible that I go and save my aging aunt who loves me and raised me like her own after I lost my parents and after she lost her husband, and by the way, that's my fault? So is taking these pills the most responsible action, or is changing into my costume and rushing to the bank to stop the Scorpion from robbing it and save those people's lives more responsible? And of course, the usual Spider-Man thing is to try and do both, and that makes his life more complicated, but he usually succeeds at both things, but with a yes, but. Like, he gets the pills back to Aunt May, but she's already fallen. And she's like, what took you so long, Peter? So he saves her after beating the Scorpion, but feels terrible about it, right? Or the Scorpion gets the money and stops menacing people and runs away, and Spider-Man lets him go because Spider-Man's got other places to be, not chasing down this guy with the money. He's not trying to hurt people anymore. And somebody snaps a picture of him swinging the opposite direction, and J. Jonah Jameson gets to complain about how they were probably in cahoots together, right? The villain's plot of rob the bank was not the point of that story, but it externalized Spider-Man's ongoing internal conflict. All right. This brings us to Batgirl of Burnside. Batgirl of Burnside looks like the first one. It looks like the kind of story where the villain's plot is the actual point. It looks like that because the algorithm has a plan, and the plan is very specifically to tear Barbara down, and then later we find out, but way late in the game do we find this out, that it's going to take over Barbara's body, and it's going to fight crime in this really brutal way. We know that it's attacking Barbara, but we don't really know what its capital P plot, its villainous plot is, until the very end. And that's kind of a heads up that it's not that kind of story. Right? It's the other kind of story. But we can forgive ourselves for being confused. Because while the algorithm looks like an external antagonist, it's really Barbara. I mean, it's a certain version of Barbara. It's a version of Barbara from when she was in a very dark and unpleasant and angry space. But it's still Barbara. Even though it's outside of her, it's actually an internal antagonist. It's the kind of story that focuses on Barbara, not on the villainous plot. I hope you're with me so far. So why does that actually make me feel like this is as cathartic as the story thinks it is for Barbara? We have watched Barbara's side of this whole thing, and that side is neatly tied up in a bow on literally every level. The algorithm's master plan was just there for Barbara to move toward it until she could get a good look at it and say out loud to everyone who would listen, but especially herself, yeah, that's not me anymore. That was its point. And that part of the story is not where the catharsis is. Because we expected her to look at that and say, yeah, that's not me anymore. The place where the catharsis is that along the way, Barbara undid every single mistake that she made along the way. Many of which were in response to the algorithm, which is another place where this can get kind of confusing. So, what's the first thing? Barbara faced her past, personified, and overcame it. All the anger, all the hurt, all the dark place. She looked it almost literally in the face and told it that that wasn't her anymore and that it never really had been. That's powerful. That's big time stuff, right? After saving all of these Burnside residents outside Hook, Batgirl may not be the beloved hero that she was during her journey of selfie discovery, but she is definitely back in the community's good graces. And she did it by being herself. She didn't do it by stopping a flashy jerk in a flashy way. She didn't do it by being everybody's friend Batgirl. She did it by just saving lives. And while that doesn't bring the restaurant back, it does undo the internal struggle that she was having over, well, if Burnside doesn't love me, who am I? She's still a hero. And now she's the kind of hero she's supposed to be. And Burnside, if not loves her, definitely likes her. Along the way, all of Barbara's most important relationships were jacked. Some of them beyond recognition. And by this point of the story, during the resolution, they're all unjacked. Her living situation with Frankie seemed really strained right from jump. Now, there were external reasons for that, right? Obviously, like the algorithm getting stolen and somebody was stealing the stuff and, you know, she had to deal with all that hungover. I mean, and then Dinah's sleeping on her couch. There were reasons that her living situation with Frankie were strained. But they're gone. Whatever those reasons were, they're not here anymore, right? Not only are she and Frankie better friends than they were before, but they're probably going to be partners in superhero stuff. And that just makes them even tighter than they were to start with. Now, from what I can tell, Dinah and Babs's falling out started in Birds of Prey. I haven't read it all. New 52 was tough on me, guys. But that falling out from Birds of Prey continued into Batgirl of Burnside. So when Dinah showed up on her doorstep, they were already fighting. Them living together did not make it any better. And of course, Barbara accidentally being the one who burned Dinah's place down also didn't make it any better. But by the end of this, Dinah has a new lease on life, and she has a new lease on life that she never would have had if she hadn't had to move to Burnside. I'm not saying Barbara did her a solid by burning her place and all her stuff, but she's got new opportunities she wouldn't have had without that happening. And in the process, the two of them were forced to stay in so close proximity to one another that eventually they would either shatter their friendship forever or it would be tested in the fires and tempered and would come out even stronger. And that's what actually happened. And when we look at Liam, that relationship may not be fixed entirely, but it is in a place where we wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of him and Babs together. And that's pretty cool. Considering how little I've liked Liam at this point, that light touch there at the end at least makes me not hate him. And last but not least, the uncorrupted algorithm is retrieved, putting Barbara's academic life back on track. And I don't think for nothing do we see these as bookends. We lost the algorithm at the very beginning, we get it back at the very end. And then in between, all these other things happen. And let's remember that before Barbara started pulling her way out of this, she was sitting alone, feeling unloved by Dinah and by Burnside, and considering Batgirl and thinking that she would just give up being Batgirl. Now, we saw a minor victory then when she puts it on and tries to go help people that are getting mugged, but then what does that turn out to be? A different kind of attack, right? But at this one, she is Batgirl to Batgirl's uttermost. And then the next time that we see Barbara, she is dancing and she is free. That, to me at least, feels like enough catharsis. We have put her through such a ringer, and every twist that we put into her has now been untwisted. And if that's not kind of the definition of catharsis, I don't know what is. And another thing I'm going to point out is, this is almost the mythic hero's journey as told through the lens of personal problems. And here at the end, it's Barbara returning home and putting everything to rights, just like heroes do. I love it. It's kind of an abrupt ending, but I love it. And I think that some of where that why isn't this a more full ending might come from the fact that the algorithm looks like an external antagonist, but is actually an internal one. What do you guys think? Especially you, Susie. And that brings us to the end of Superhero University, Batgirl of Burnside. We have covered a lot of ground. I really love this story. The more I read it, and more I looked at it for you guys, the more I came to love it. I love it. I love the structure. I love how deep the problems for Barbara go. And I love how crazy and superhero weird it gets by the end. I just love every bit of it. And the fact that we managed to do all that while being a sort of origin story, at least a little bit, a soft reboot, and throw in a backdoor pilot for another awesome series with Black Canary, that is a lot of heavy lifting in this story that I never actually noticed was being done until after the fact. And I cannot get enough of it. We will probably return to these creators again with more Batgirl. I'm sure we'll return with more Batgirl at some point. But watch this space as I do something a little different. And I take a step back and do a couple of episodes of Superhero University 101, where I talk about real basic concepts like, what is a superhero? What is a supervillain? Is there a difference between a supervillain and a costumed criminal? Or I talk about, in more detail, my favorite opposite number villains. All that stuff. I'm not going to do a bunch of those. I'll probably do one or two while I'm getting ready for the next story arc that we're going to take a look at. Superhero University, Batman and Son. We are finally going to start the Grant Morrison opus. And we're not just going to do it from one end to the other, but we are definitely, finally going to get it started. And I am incredibly excited about that. So, after a couple episodes of Superhero University 101, I can say in all honesty that I'll see you back, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks again to all my wonderful patrons. I can't do it without you. You guys make it worth it and awesome. And thanks to everybody who is listening. You can always contact me to discuss any of the stuff that I've brought up during any of the Superhero Universities, but especially the stuff from this session. If you want to talk more to me about structure and about whether I'm completely off base with the internal-external antagonist thing with the algorithm, I am available for all of those conversations. And I will remind you that patrons get extra special opportunities to have those conversations with me. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be starting a patrons-only book club where we read something that is really cool and fun, but maybe not enough to do a Superhero University on. All kinds of reasons for you to become a patron of Pulp Diction Productions. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Superhero University is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. And if you can't support us financially, please leave the show a rating and review on iTunes. It's the best way to help others discover the show. Keep up with Pulp Diction news by following our host on Twitter @Joshua Unruh, or find us at facebook.com/pulpdictionproductions.